Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other's gold.
One is silver and the other's gold.
One is silver and the other's gold.
The Village Square, a nervy bunch of liberals and conservatives who believe that disagreement and dialogue make for a good conversation, a good country, and a good time. At the Village Square, we talk about politics, religion, and race. You know, the topics your mom taught you never to discuss in polite company. Listen, at the Village Square, we make pigs fly.
Welcome to Village SquareCast. This is Vanessa Rouse. Thanks for joining us for Let Friendship Redeem the Republic with the God Squad. In our year-long celebration of the superpower of healthy friendships across differences, we're going to talk about how to tackle difficult topics within the relationships that matter to us the most, and how to keep friendships healthy even when conflicts arise. Funding for this program was provided through a grant from Florida Humanities with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Today's program will be facilitated by Pastor Betsy Ouelette Zierden of St. George Island United Methodist Church. The rest of the panel will introduce themselves to you shortly, so let's turn it over to Pastor Betsy.
Hi, it's good to be back with you. See so many familiar faces. I am Pastor Betsy Ouelette Zierden, as she said, and I'm currently serving in a really hard appointment at St. George Island United Methodist Church, where the parsonage has a view of the bay. So it's really rough. But we also have a home in Tallahassee, and I stay connected to friends here and to the community here. So I'm delighted to be a part of God Squad this morning. You see some other familiar faces. And so just briefly, if you would each introduce yourself, we'll start with Latricia.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Latricia Scriven, and I serve here in Tallahassee at St. Paul's United Methodist Church. I am not by the bay, but I am on Lake Ella.
I'm Father Tim. I'm at the Co-Cathedral of St. Thomas More. There's no water in view of my house. So.
Rabbi Jack Romberg, the Emeritus of Temple Israel, and it's just nice to now and then be back here. I have to say, though, that my thing that I am deeply very concerned about, and actually, is the playoffs for the Philadelphia Eagles. Because I gotta follow them.
So I just want to make a comment about friendship. I've been reading a lot, even this week. There's articles in one of the newspapers I was reading. It said this: a growing body of research shows that friends are essential to a healthy life, and that they are just as important for our well-being as healthy eating habits or a good night's sleep. Researchers have found that large social networks lower our risk of premature death, and even more than exercise and dieting alone. And here's another little tip. Friends, and having friends and networks of friends, is even more important, according to the researchers, than living near family and children, which I guess that's a comforting thing for me since my children live so far away. So friendships are important, and that's what we're talking about this morning. So I'm going to give you each an opportunity, and I got lots of great questions. So don't talk too long in between my questions, because I want to get to all of them. Who am I looking at? Anyway, the first thing is, do you have a friend that has been your friend through the ages, through your life, a special friend? Who is that person? And tell us just a little bit about that special friend. Who wants to go first?
I can go. One of my best friends I've known since we met when we were in 6th grade, and then we were roommates in college. And he's also a priest, amazingly, in Orlando. And we both have similar roles in our church, and that's who he is. Yeah, his name's Father Josh.
Yeah, I have a number of deep, deep friends from even my childhood. And in fact, one of them, I was with him for the first time in 12 years because I met him actually when I was 9 years old and we had first moved to Allentown, Pennsylvania. And we went to college together, and we've just been together but we finally got together for the first time in about 14, 15 years on December 11th, because I actually was in Allentown for the first time in decades to speak about the book that I had done. So,
one of my greatest friends actually lives in Atlanta right now, right outside of Atlanta. And yeah, she's one of my greatest friends. But one of the things I just learned from you, Betsy, is that I don't have to do as much walking or eating better. I just need to get more friends in my life. But she is the person that knows all the things that I would probably not tell a lot of people, but she is the one who knows them and knows me and still loves me.
That's awesome. So is there anything that you might discover? Is there any issue or stance that your friend or any friend has taken that would actually cause you to end your relationship?
No,
Not for that particular one.
not for that particular.
Okay.
yeah, same thing for me. It's not.
All right. Well, what about somebody else? Is there an issue or a belief that would cause you to step away from a friendship?
In the way that I think of friendship, no. Because I think that even if we disagree, we may have to decide that particular conversations, we may not have those conversations as much. But in my understanding and thought of a friend, I can't imagine something that big, an issue that becomes such a wedge that we are no longer friends. That's not happened that I can think of.
What would change a friendship for me is if they did something truly illegal that was against a person. I mean, if they, shot somebody, or if they, something like that would really make me look at that friendship, and if I was going to be serious about it, that's the kind of thing that would make me turn away from a friend.
And I might be like, are we hiding the body first? And then tell me what happened so I get an understanding of where we go from here. But I got you.
I have a joke with some of my friends, and one of my cousin actually is here locally. When I first met her, I didn't know her. I met her a few years back, and I joked, I'm like, wait, we're blood now. I said, so if you get arrested, just call me. I'll come bail you out, no questions. I don't care what you did, so I expect the same. More likely that would happen to me, I told her. So that's kind of my thing. But I think friendship is, what does that mean? And I think that's the trick, right? Is I would consider myself a friend of all. So no matter what they did or what their beliefs are, because I would, in that term, a friend meaning like I care about you as a human being. And your well-being, but obviously there's degrees of that. There's some friends that I have that I consider very close. There's my priest brothers that I was on vacation with just last week. Those are real close to me, more so than some other friends. So there's degrees of friendship. And so I could see, like, if a friend of mine was doing things that actively undermined, what I'm doing in my life, then that would change our relationship. And so I think it's fluid. I don't think it's static. And I can't think of anything particular that would say, okay, I'm your enemy now, so to speak, right? So I can't think of anything off my head, unless I guess they were trying to hurt innocent people or something.
And I think if somebody is truly your friend, I mean, truly, truly your friend, if you see, all right, putting aside, it has nothing to do with killing or whatever, but if you see somebody maybe thinking about something in a really weird way, because I've had, friends of mine ask me questions about something that maybe I was thinking about or believing or whatever, not about God, but about, just, things that are going on that you start to think about and whatever. If somebody is truly your friend, you can have a conversation with them about things that are different from the way you folks had talked about before. And if it's truly your friendship, then it's not the same thing as somebody had killed somebody. It's the difference between what you were thinking about, and maybe you can discuss it. And even if you don't agree with each other on certain things, if you really talk it through, you can keep your friendship.
Okay. Well, what about when a friend walks away from you? So one of the questions I'll invite you to answer, but I want to share, the question is, have you lost a friend, not just a congregant, but a friend, perhaps, or maybe specifically in a congregation, in your congregation, because of something you've said in the pulpit, or because of a decision that you've made? And I have. I've been, I felt deeply betrayed because of who I am and something I said and some of the things that I'm about. And what happened with me is I was basically ghosted. You know that word, ghosted? They just sort of disappear from your life and you're not sure why. And you try to bring it up and there's no communication. And these are people that you like traveled with and were deeply engaged in life with. And I know that happens to pastors. It happened to me. Do any of you have a similar situation? And I know it's happened to some of you as well. It could be business related, or it could be politically related. Could be maybe your faith has challenged them in a way that makes them uncomfortable. Let's talk about that, a little bit about that.
Well, I actually did lose a friend at one time, and it was somebody who welcomed me to Temple Israel back in 2001, and we became friends right away. And one of the things he was doing, for me and with me is he was teaching me how to golf, okay? And we would go out and we would golf together. So for a couple of years, we were doing that, usually on a Sunday afternoon, after I was done in the Shabbat, in this Sunday morning teaching, of the kids. Okay, so we get into 2004, and you remember the war that, was done in Iraq, okay? Well, I gave a speech, actually a sermon, during, I think it was Rosh Hashanah in 2004, about how I could not stand that war and how I disagreed both with Kerry, who was running for president, because he was in favor of the war, and I disagreed with him, and I really disagreed with George Bush, who was the president, and he was the one who put us in the war. And I said, I don't agree with either of them about this. Well, the person who had been my friend, he thought that I was basically just going against Bush, and that I was in favor of, speaking in favor of Kerry, which I definitely was not. I could even today show you the sermon that I gave, that I was just against the war, that I thought the war was bad for us in general, and he stopped our friendship because of that.
I actually cannot think of anyone. I mean, certainly I can think of people where we did not see eye to eye or hurt, over some things.
Stop talking about me.
I'm not talking about you yet. We'll talk about that. But none where, and even a couple of instances where we may not have been as close because we just didn't have as much in common as we thought. But I cannot think of a situation where we just ended the friendship.
I'm grateful that you haven't had that experience, because it is really gut-wrenching.
And maybe they did, and I just don't realize it. And I'm like oblivious, thinking, we're good. That could be the case too.
I'm trying to think of whether I should say what I'm about to say. Well, just say there's, I've had people angry at me, obviously. I'm a priest. People get mad. Sometimes they misunderstand what I'm saying, or sometimes I don't say things probably as I should. I don't know. So I've had people walk away. I've had some friends who've kind of ceased, but I don't feel like I've ever given up. There's a character even in this town who really, really, really doesn't like me, and I had to trespass him from our church, and he really still doesn't like me even more now. But nonetheless, even after all that and all the lies and stuff and everything else, I would, if he ever wanted to talk, I would be there, and give him a chance to change. So.
Well, I love what you said about just you kind of stay open. And I'm still open, and I'm still hoping that my friend is going to come back into my life at some point. And that's happened to me through the years. Sometimes it's situational, sometimes it's worldviews that are different, and then I catch up with their worldview, or I decide it's not as important, and our friendship does rekindle itself. And I know that those of you out there that are shaking your heads have had that experience as well. To just keep your heart open is really important, and not to become, like you said, enemies. So you all sound like you're doing a great job hanging on to friendships and being engaged and being fully who you are and speaking your mind. How have you navigated your friendships with people that are entirely different in their worldviews, political views, and perhaps are not as ready to be reticent about that?
Well, I think the way that we have done that is not the way that a bunch of other people will do it. And I'm going to give an example. Tim and I have been, we're very different in certain ways because he's a priest, in Catholic, and I'm a rabbi in Judaism, okay? And so that creates some real differences. But we really got to know each other about 10 years ago and became friends and started to do some things together that we really enjoyed besides, even doing this together. And so the differences between us is a good example of how you can be a friend and really enjoy being with somebody who has some different beliefs and some different thoughts of what you. But yet, Tim was always terrific at keeping our friendship together and respecting me, and I always have respected you, Tim, because those sort of beliefs, while they can be important in certain ways to yourself, it doesn't have to be in the way of friendship. Well, there are people, though, who are going to be very different and handle things very differently than the way that Tim or I did in our friendship. So what the real question, I think, is, no, I'm not arguing with you at all, Betsy, because Betsy, by the way, is a friend of mine since about 2003 or 4, okay? And, so I'm not arguing. But the truth is, at least the truth from my perspective, is that there are some people who, with their beliefs, will not even think about keeping a friendship, okay? And if it's political things, there are people on the right or the left who will take that position of not keeping a friendship with somebody who's very different from them. There are some people in different, because of the differences in religion, who will not keep the friendship because all of a sudden they decide that, I can't be a friend with that person. And the real question that we, I think, have to consider is, how can we possibly handle or tell our other friends or people to handle those situations, okay? Because there are those people that will pull those friendships down, okay?
Well, first, I was going to say, to an earlier point, definitely I think there are people who don't like me, right? And that I don't care for either. And I also think that in my concept of friendship, there are people that I very much like, and we grow closer, and they may or may not be friends yet, even though we take up space and we share conversations. So I do think part of it is all around how we define what it means to be a friend. That said, you want me to tell them now? You want to include?
Go ahead.
You want to start?
You start, Latricia.
Okay.
I'm facilitating.
See, since one was shared, Betsy and I have had conflict and gotten through it. And I actually think that we became better friends after having conflict. Because I think that true friendship is tested when differences do arise and we figure out if it's worth navigating. And so there are times in my life that differences have arisen with people that maybe it wasn't worth, going through what it would take to navigate the process because they weren't actually friends. We may have been acquaintances, we may have been coworkers, but it just may not have been worth the emotional, spiritual bandwidth that it would take to navigate the issue. Not so with a Betsy, and we navigated. I'll let you pick up and then I'll jump in. You want to say what happened?
Well, I mean, don't tell all the details, but Latricia was filling a role when I was away from the church, and I was feeling really vulnerable, and we disagreed on how she should handle things or how she did handle things. At least in my mind, that's what happened, and it was very emotionally painful, and I started crying, which I do. If you know me, I cry in the pulpit, I cry everywhere all the time. And that was very offensive to her.
Well, it was triggering.
Triggering. Okay.
So
interesting.
Yes, this is good. This is good stuff. Because as we're having the conversation, and I didn't know, so as much as she cries, I laugh a lot. And so as she's speaking and I'm hearing it, even though she is being emotionally vulnerable, which I now know, I engage those tears as these are white women's tears that want to control me. We are not going down this road. And we actually, though, were able to give each other space and then have a conversation about it. In fact, there was a day we were riding in the car. I'm like, Google white women's tears. And so because...
I did. I wasn't driving, so I did.
She wasn't driving. But because we were able to have a conversation, to be vulnerable with each other, to share and respect each other in what was going on, I think it deepened who we were together as friends.
And it enlightened me about tears. White women tears have been used as a weapon against the Black community and men in particular, and I had no idea. And so I learned a lot, I changed a lot, and I'm grateful for that.
Me too.
And Latricia is a children's author. She writes books called like Jesus Laughs, Jesus Dances. You haven't done that one yet. And she wrote a book called Jesus Weeps, and she dedicated it. In her book, she wrote to me in the fly that it was partly because of my tears. She recognized Jesus' tears. So it's so one of the points is conflict done well promotes deeper intimacy. So how do you do conflict well? I mean, we've already talked a little bit about how you stay open, you have an open stance. And I love what you said about, you have to make sure that it's worth the emotional investment. Like, where are you coming from? Because it may be way easier to walk away or to say something flippant just because that's the way we get along sometimes. My husband's a state climatologist, and when people say to him, so do you believe in global warming? He says, so how about Alabama? He says, he just starts to talk about Alabama football. So deflection is
Which is worse.
I don't know. Exactly, right? Exactly. But I think deflection is important.
As somebody who went to Pitt, I think Alabama is worse.
I'd like to kind of respond to is that okay? Thank you, Rabbi Jack, for your words too, and for your friendship. And I was just pondering as we're reflecting here again back. What does it mean to be a friend? And I think there's again different types of friends, and I think if I remember correctly, in the Four Loves, C.S. Lewis kind of describes philos, friendship, that kind of love, as two people who are on a certain path or looking at the same thing or have a certain common interest. So, all of my friends, we have something in common that we are both journeying towards. Maybe it's the pursuit of truth, or maybe it's fishing, or watching FSU football. So the real football team. Just kidding. I have friends that are Alabama fans too, but we're not friends when it comes to football, right? So that's the thing, and I think it's fascinating that we've come to a point in our culture where this kind of matters in our relationships, that we've allowed these labels and our ideologies to become our identity. I'll also say that kind of tied to that is people's sexual preferences or whatever. It becomes like a big thing, like, I'm gay, or I'm a heterosexual, or I'm a bisexual. Like, yeah, guess what? I like hamburgers. I like steak. I like redfish over trout. Like, no one cares. That doesn't need to be my identity, or at least it's not my entire identity. So my views on a particular political issue or a particular president or a governor or a congressman or whatever, that's not who I am. And those things hopefully are sort of fluid as I take on new information. One thing that was sort of frustrating during the pandemic was simply people kind of got into this lane of, either you're all for the pandemic, like I'm all for masks and prevention, or I think it's fake. And it's like you couldn't budge from these positions no matter what data came out or what evidence showed. And I think we have to get away from this idea that this is so critically important, what my political beliefs are, who I'm supporting as a politician. Ironically, on my way here, Mrs. Robinson was playing in the car. And you remember the line? You get loud about it, shout about it when you have to choose. Either way you look at it, you lose. And that's the fact, right? If we think, again, that politicians are going to save us or political parties are going to save us, we're really mistaken. Really, they're not going to save us. And if we identify with them solely, I think it's just going to continue to lead to the division and distrust that we see already in our culture.
Well, back in the day, my mother taught me, and you've heard this, that at a dinner party, you don't talk about religion or politics or money. And it seems like all the conversations are about religion, politics, or money right now. And I love Village Square because it does promote civility. And I believe that the civility that is missing, it might be simply avoiding topics that are divisive when you know that they're going to be divisive. And I love what you said about common interests. Having common interests with people might be enough to hold you together. I know I heard about some sisters that have very different worldviews that spend a lot of time together and appreciate each other because they're sisters, right? You set aside things.
I was thinking that one of the things that makes friendship work is being willing to say the truth. And I just don't think that many people are willing to say the truth. And sometimes it's because we may feel vulnerable in a situation or even with our friends, and being able to hold what they think and it be what they think, and we don't have to think the same thing. And I was thinking about a sister that I'm close to, a clergy sister, and we were having a conversation about an equity issue that affected both of us. And she said, Latricia, I want you to have what should be the case. She said, and I'm also afraid that you getting what you should have means something will be taken from me. And I had to hear that. And I had to not simply be reactionary, but to say that I'm appreciating the fact that she is willing to be vulnerable enough to say that to me. And then I can hear it and decide to empathize or not. Thankfully, I did, in a way that doesn't end our friendship, because this is her truth. And then I can say, I get that. And if I hear this from a person who is my friend that loves me, how do you think I have to navigate those who I know absolutely don't? And we were able to have a conversation about that because we were friends and still friends, but we see through a glass darkly.
I really like what you just described. And I also really agreed with, very much agree with, that the truth is so important, okay? And I also will add to, I'm just adding to what you said, something a little bit different because we're all clergy, okay? And that is, I have said through all my years, in talking to the folks in Temple Israel, one of the things that I have talked about, and I think I've said it here too years ago, which is that what the Torah says and what it's trying to teach us to do is not a political position. It's not pushing you to do something politically. And I'll give you an example. In Deuteronomy chapter 15, it's talking about how you handle, or how it's important to, not how exactly, but how it's important to handle people who are poor, okay? And how they need to be helped in a certain way. Now, this is an example that I have given to my congregation a number of times, which is, number one, okay, it says you're supposed to help people who need help, but it's not saying that it should be done by personal giving money, just, charity, or that it should be done by the government. Those are two different positions of whether it should be done by the government or done by individual people's, giving a donation. Okay, what it's saying is that we need to be thinking about how important it is to help people who need the help. And the point is for us as friends and people who know each other to discuss, okay, what's the best way to go about this? Now, if somebody has the position that they feel that somebody who needs help shouldn't get the help, that becomes a different conversation. But hopefully, the person that you're interacting with may disagree with how to do it, but understands how important it is to help people who need help.
Well, you already shared a sacred text, and it looks like it's time for us to take questions and comments. No? We got a few more minutes? Okay. Well, I was going to ask you, do the sacred text, or does our Bible, does Jesus have anything, I think he does, but I want to hear from you, to say about friendship?
I mean, I think so. Even when I think about the disciples and who Jesus calls when he's on the journey, and these 12, there's like a tax collector that nobody likes. There's a zealot. There's somebody who's gonna betray. There are all of these different, there are two that are at least related. There are all of these different personalities that somehow, because they've decided to be on this journey together, they go forth. I don't think they always get along. In fact, they fight. But I think that the whole thing that holds it together is this idea of love. And, you mentioned it earlier, not just, this agape God love that we all try to strive towards, or some try to strive towards and may not make it, but even that friendship love that says our friendship is more important than all of the other things that exist. And we can disagree, and can we still love? And so for me, one of the big anchoring teachings is around love and what that means.
Well, I think in our context, a real appropriate teaching of Jesus is that not to call your brother a fool, and to not be angry at your brother, and that goes beyond eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. It goes beyond do not kill. But it says, whoever is angry at his brother is liable to judgment, whoever calls him a fool, and so on. So I think in our culture right now, what we're dealing with and facing as a nation, as a society, I think that's very appropriate as a religious text for me, is because we're often so tempted to just hate on those who disagree with us. and I think that would go against Jesus' teachings.
And that kind of what you all said is that there's a higher concept and a higher goal that should be the focus, right? So loving unity and working for the betterment of all people, that's more important in the end than very unique or particular perspectives that can divide. So I'm interested to know if there's a comment or a question that you have for our panel. And I think Vanessa has a microphone here. Oh, right up here. Judith.
The word that keeps coming up for me is respect. If you can still respect somebody and they respect you, regardless of all of these differences, if you still see each other, as human beings, then you can keep the conversation going. You can keep talking. It's when you get confronted with this wall of lack of respect, of disrespect, of hate, which is based in disrespect. That's where I get stuck. And I think that's where we all get stuck. What do you do with that?
Well, for the longest time, I had no idea what it meant. Let's go, Brandon. No idea what that meant. Now I know. And I met a friend, right up here, Vanessa. Daryl, okay. But now I know what that means, and that perspective is different than what I hold. So when I went to St. George Island, different neighborhood than Myers Park, I had to really quickly kind of figure out, this is who these folks are, and I want to love them, and I want them to love me, and I want to hang out with them. So I just make a funny face if somebody says something that's like not, I just want to let them know that I'm not with them on that, but that we're with each other in other ways. So I've learned how to navigate that by using humor and deflection and just saying, not the way I think. And that's been helpful. So, Daryl.
Thanks, everybody. I think the conversation is fascinating. I was thinking back to when I was in school. I like to read Aristotle, and his idea of friendship was between equals. So you needed to find somebody that was like you, in some sense. So I went around trying to find people like me. I had a certain self-estimation, trying to find people like me. But then I realized the people that I was friends with, it wasn't because they were like me, but it was because they cared for me, they loved me, they helped me, and they let me help them, So I was thinking about what you said, Father, about our beliefs, and I'm coming to the question here. And it seems to me that we discard each other for our beliefs. At the same time, many of our faith communities that we value, they teach us to love people, but they also give us a heap of beliefs that we often use to discard people. So what can we do as a faith community to communicate values in terms of our beliefs, but not have them have a hierarchy over the value of people?
That's a great question. And I'll give you...
Repeat the question, please.
Okay. So we teach in our faith communities beliefs, and we teach love, but sometimes our beliefs cause us to feel like we need to discard people because their beliefs are different. And Tim, I think, go ahead.
I guess what I would say is I think there's a mistake on our part often to think that if I say that something's wrong or is not moral or whatever, that somehow that means I'm against this person or against, and I think we have to separate actions and so on from people, right? So, there's in my mind, I'm a sinner. I'm the greatest of sinners, and people in my congregation are certainly sinners, and that doesn't mean that if I say something, one of my beliefs as a Catholic, I'm pro-life. I think abortion's wrong. It doesn't mean that everybody who has had an abortion or supports that side of the beliefs is evil or wrong. And I think that's a big mistake on the pro-life side, is to demonize the people on the other side. I think it's equally as foolish on the pro-choice side to demonize the people on the pro-life side. So I think that's the mistake that we've made somehow, is that somehow we've kind of joined, like, if I have a belief about a value or a way to live, that somehow everybody who's not, again, this goes back to this team mentality that this is my identity, this is who I am now, and everybody else is wrong and my enemy. Then I think we got to overcome that somehow. And I don't think, because we can take religion out of it. Everybody here has values. If you're an atheist, you have values. And our government is informed by values from somewhere. And I don't know, where are they, I know I've challenged my friends here before about this. You can't come up with a moral value from science alone or from statements of fact. So they come from somewhere. And I think we have to be willing to accept that fact, that beliefs and values, they're somewhere. We're going to debate this. They move, they change, or maybe not change, but we adapt them in different circumstances, what we used to call wisdom. And so I think we have to be okay with that. And again, not see people as just combatants and hostile. I personally, you asked the question, or someone asked the question, how do we deal with people who disagree with us? I'm very fascinated by people who disagree with me, because I'm always right, So I want to know, how did you come up with this? Because,
And he's not kidding. Now, one of my favorite memories of these two, I've shared it once before at a God Squad. They were on my back porch. We had dinner at my house, and these two were still sitting there with me drinking wine, and it was when former President Trump was a candidate. He wasn't elected yet, and this conversation started, and you were in utter disbelief that this was happening, and you were very open-minded to the possibility. Do you remember that conversation?
It's actually the night after the election.
Oh, was it the night after? So he'd already won?
You guys were absolutely beside yourselves. That's why you were drinking. You were drinking so much.
There was a lot of wine and a lot of tears, but some of those were happy tears, and thanks for helping us get through that night, Tim.
Yeah, I said everything would be okay. Don't worry. And here we are. We're still here,
Still here. We're still here. So anyway, go ahead.
So I think that whatever we believe, love transcends it. And that when I can truly engage people, and I actually think that we are all created in the image of God. And my prayer often is, I've added to Jesus's, when he says, God forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. And so my addition that I often say is, God forgive them, for they know not what they are doing, even when I think they absolutely know what they are doing, because at our core, sometimes we are too broken to know. And so I think that we are created in God's image. And because of each other, because of the world in which we live, there is so much brokenness. And we see through different lenses. Like, I did not know how much that was true until having our son, who we did not know was born with cataracts. And when he was able to have cataract surgery last year at 2019, when he went out at 19 for the first time, went outside and said, oh, that's what y'all mean by leaves. He could describe a tree. He knew what a tree was. In elementary school, he had drawn a tree. How many of us go through life, but because we actually have different lived experiences and traditions, we cannot see, and we want each other to see what we see, but it is sometimes impossible. Like, I've been married 25 years, and sometimes I'm like, you can't possibly think that. And he's saying the same to me, like, you cannot possibly believe that. But when I can, with the help of a power that is beyond me, access a love that I don't even understand, then that helps me to transcend all things, because I get to start with, you are created in the image of God. And I too think I'm right almost all the time. But what I've said is, my husband's looking like almost. And I had a friend that say that to me. She said, you think you're right? I said, I do. And I'm not foolish enough to know that I'm right. So there is still a thing that says, but can love transcend all the rest, because we start with a common humanity? And so for me, I'm willing to throw away all the lines that say, throw them out because of this and because of this and because of this and because of this, and say, nope, but love. Because for me, it's more important.
Because you mentioned us being connected to God, being like God in a certain way. Actually, since I'm doing the service tonight at Temple Israel, I'm actually saying something about this that's connected to the Torah portion of this week for Jews, okay? And here is one of the things I'm going to be talking about and saying, and that is that in this week's Torah portion, when God is speaking to Moses to get the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, okay, it was very clear that from what's in the Torah, that God had not been prayed by the Israelites in Egypt very, very much at all, but they started to ask him to get them out of slavery. And God cared terribly about the Israelites and was pushing Moses to do the work, to talk to to get them out. Well, the way we are supposed to be like God is not the way we look, not the way our faces or anything are, but the attitude of, if somebody is not paying much attention to us, we should care if they have problems and need the help. And in fact, in Judaism, there's a lot in the Torah, yes, about traditions that you do, the way you pray and, being kosher and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of what is in the Torah is how you're supposed to act as a person, what you're supposed to do as a person to care for other people. That's a huge amount of what's in the Torah.
So caring is an action word, not just a feeling.
Correct.
And regardless of the divisions that we see, we are still all connected. And I think that love is what connects us all, right? And so it's naive to think that we can stay in our silos and stay separate, because even in our separation, we're affecting one another. We're all united. We're all united in the sense of under God's reign and love. I have nothing more but another question, if you want one, or another comment. Yes.
Thank you. What separates a person from an acquaintance? What character trait moves them from acquaintance to friend, a true friend? For me, it has changed as I have grown.
And what the research shows is actual caring. A friendship requires something to be done. It's not just what you feel or think, but doing something selfless for another person is what caring means. So to be a more caring person will promote deeper and broader friendships. And I want to end today with something I know some of you know, so I need help. It's something I learned in Girl Scouts. You know this song? Please help me. Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other
friends, but
Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other's gold. We were going to do a round.
Okay, let's do the round. Okay.
All right, this side of the room, let's start with you.
Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other's
old. One is silver and the other's gold.
One is silver and the other's gold.
Thank you so much. That was just awesome.
I was a Girl Scout.
Yay! Thank you so much. Guys, you didn't know that? You didn't learn that in Cub Scout? Well, now you know it. So thank you, Village Square, for allowing us to do this. We hope that we are modeling friendship across diversity and across division.
Hey there, Vanessa back here with you again. Have I told y'all lately how much I absolutely love the God Squad? And I love the audience. Every single program just delights me. And here's what especially delighted me about this one, which, by the way, starts with a little behind-the-scenes moment. So guess what, y'all? We did not plan to have two pairs on this panel who each had personal disagreements with each other. That was a surprise to me, and I think it was my favorite part, besides that Girl Scout song, of course. Anyway, I was going to say that this was super lucky, but then I realized I don't think it's luck at all. I think it's the product of this thing that we do here. We draw out real substance from people, and we practice dealing with conflict in a healthy way. We feature people who are doing this in their own lives and who value deep relationships with those around them. So cheers to them, and cheers to all of you for diving in with us on this journey. All right, I've got one more thing to share before we close out. Speaking of delightful, check this out. One of the audience members called me later in the day after this program to say that this had inspired him to rekindle a relationship. And he had already gone to see his friend, and they had a fantastic visit. And even though I was on the phone with this guy, I could tell he was just glowing. So my takeaway is this. You never know what people need to hear at what time or for what reason. But if we all keep tuning in for things like this that help us feel more connected rather than more divided, this can be our new normal. Imagine if we saw bridging narratives around us most of the time, instead of all the divide and conquer mess constantly. That's what we do here at the Village Square. We are working towards a tipping point every single day, along with hundreds of other organizations from sea to shining sea. To stay up to date with everything happening at the Village Square so you can keep bridging constantly with us on a regular basis, sign up for our newsletter at villagesquare.us. Scroll to the bottom for the newsletter sign-up box. And please consider joining our members in supporting this programming. You can become a member for just $7 a month or $76 a year, and your business can join for $250. Go to villagesquare.us/donate to join today. Funding for this program was provided through a grant from Florida Humanities with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Check out Florida Humanities online at floridahumanities.org. We appreciate you listening to Let Friendship Redeem the Republic with the God Squad. Until next time, we challenge you to reach out with an open heart and mind to someone who doesn't look or think like you. It changes everything. We'll talk to you soon, and thanks so much for listening to Village SquareCast.